Let's expand a little on the literacy conversation now and look at accessibility to books in African languages. For that conversation, I'm joined by Dr. Xolisa Guzula, who's a senior lecturer of applied languages and literacy studies at the University of Cape Town. A very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Guzula. Children's reading levels in South Africa have been in dire straits for quite some time, exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. The minister says buy children books and let them have access to books. Where do you think the crux of the problem lies?
Well, thank you very much, Mko, and to the listeners. The minister is correct in saying that children need to be accessing books. But the crux of the problem is that we know that 2% of all books published in South Africa are in African languages. So that means that we are not publishing enough in African languages. Even when we do publish, the books do not make it to the bookstores. Even the books that we know we have worked on are very hard to find in bookshops. And we have many people contacting us asking, where can I get this book in isiXhosa? Where can I get this book? It means that if we are not making books accessible to public schools, in maybe making school libraries. If we are not making school libraries and classroom libraries, people will struggle to access the books. Mm-hmm. And also the fact that many public libraries have a lot of English books compared to African language books. That is the crux of the problem for me.
Perhaps expand a little bit on that, access to African books and allowing children to interact and engage with African books. I would think that if you know how to read, be it in isiZulu or in English, but you still cannot comprehend, cannot understand what you're reading, that's where the actual problem would lie, irrespective of the language that you're reading in.
Well, it's a complex it's a complex ecosystem, like the minister has said. You have got to have parents who read to their children every day. Then you must have teachers who teach reading very well in the classroom, and that reading that they teach in the classroom must also include reading for leisure books, meaning that teachers must be reading aloud books to children and allowing them to touch books and to read books, but also teach them the skills of reading. So all those things must happen simultaneously, not just one or the other, but all of them. So listening comprehension or comprehension happens when you engage with books with the children all the time. And so the children get to understand what you take out of books from discussing books with them. So if that doesn't happen enough in schools, children can decode all they want. They can read the words, but they might as well be barking at the words, because there's a difference between sounding out the words and knowing how to sound them and understanding the meaning behind the words. So we need to have a multi-pronged approach to help children learn to read with meaning. We need to have books available to them. We need to have teachers who understand how to teach reading in African languages. We need to have also teachers who understand that the ecosystem of learning to read, that it is not just one thing. It's not just teaching the skills, but it's teaching the skills plus giving children access to books, plus reading aloud to them, plus discussing books with the children. That is all together can make a child who's able to read.
You raise a very important point there, teaching teachers who understand how to teach reading. That in itself could also be a really big part of trying to get clarity and understanding on where perhaps some of the problems lie. What interventions are needed to perhaps boost teachers' skills when it comes to teaching learners on how to understand what they're reading?
Well, there are interventions from government. interventions from organizations such as Fundawande, interventions from many NGOs helping teachers to teach reading. But the problem lies again with how do you conceptualize the teaching of reading? Is the teaching of reading mainly just composed of teaching the skills like A, E, I, O, U, Ma, Me, Mi, Mo, Mu? Or does it also include books read for pleasure? So for us, it includes both teaching the skills. Children must be able to see words. They must be able to see how this word is formed, what letters form this word. But they must also have access to books, because it's like a computer. If you are learning to only the parts of the computer, but you do not practice using the computer, you will not know how to type and use the computer. So yes, to teaching the skills, but plus yes to learning to use reading every day in our lives. We talk of literacy as an everyday practice. Reading every day, writing every day is what is going to make children able to read.
As you really highlight the importance of reading and access to books, African language books, let's perhaps expand on the significance and the opportunities which lie in really reading and understanding African languages, especially we're living in a time perhaps where African language by some parents may be undervalued, but there lies great opportunities in comprehending and being fully excellent at just narrating a story, or perhaps understanding what you're reading when it comes to the African language space.
There are many opportunities about being able to read in one's language. Research has shown that, especially research in bilingual education and in second language learning, it shows that what children already know in their home language transfers to the learning of the second languages. So if our children are learning in African languages and are then going to learn in English, then those skills that they've already acquired by being able to read in African languages, those skills will transfer to the learning of English. They won't start from the beginning, because, use of capital letter is done in both languages. Full stops, you know how they are. We know what a paragraph is. What a phrase is. So all those things that have been learned in the home language will transfer to the learning of the second. It will make things easier. So there are many opportunities, but for me, the biggest problem is that we are teaching children to read only in the foundation phase. And we are latching on this understanding that once the children know how to read in their language, they will be able to read in English when they get to the intermediate phase. I feel that African languages are being used as a means to acquiring English, rather than as a means for children being literate in general, in their own languages. So what happens in the intermediate phase, while books have been made available for the foundation phase, we now see a lot of books in the foundation phase. But when the children get to intermediate phase, they do not access books in their languages. There seems to be a push for English, because now English is a medium of instruction in grade 4. Therefore, there's less effort in producing any text in African languages. Now, there's an opportunity being missed here. If the content subjects that are being taught in school are taught in English, and the children do not yet understand English, can you imagine what would happen if the books were written in African languages? For example, non-fiction texts that are written in African languages, they would actually support the learning of the content subjects in English. But because that is not the foresight of the department of producing a lot of non-fiction texts that support the learning of the content subjects that the children are learning in grade 4 onwards, if that is not in the strategy, then we will see many children who are not able to read in any language, because English is new to them in grade 4 as a medium of instruction, and then there's less effort being put onto African languages. So we seem to be missing a lot of opportunities there. And our understanding is that if these two languages are used simultaneously, as mediums of instruction from grade 4 onwards, and books are made available in English and African languages, children can learn better in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. Dr. Xolisa Guzula, Senior Lecturer of Applied Languages and Literacy Studies at the University of Cape Town.